Hello and welcome to my channel, friends. I'm Andrea Lynn, and today I talk with Paula Wright about my kind, females, female competence hierarchies to be exact. Paula started a forum called Darwinian Gender Studies, and she specializes in female selection pressures. So I wanted to speak with her because I've heard a number of I guess, podcasts and talks about male dominance hierarchies. So I was just really curious about how females, human females, or women, how we sort of select ourselves and order ourselves. Because it's definitely there. We talk a little bit about the movie Mean Girls because that's my basis for all of this, and we go from there. So I think this is it's rather enlightening, so I hope you guys like it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you don't already, please subscribe. Oh, one more thing. I recorded this earlier than usual, and I had quite a bit of sunlight streaming in, causing me to look rather phantom-like. It took me a few minutes to realize this. So if you're wondering why I look, well, we'll say angelic, but it's a little bit creepier than that. If you're wondering why I look like I'm just completely washed out amidst beams of light, that's why. So anyway, on to the episode. I want to speak to you about female dominance hierarchies, but to start, could you tell me how you know about this kind of thing and where you specialize in these kinds of things?
Well, I left school without any qualifications, and a recommendation from the careers advisor to get a job in the cheese counter at Presto's, which is kind of like, I don't know, like Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as far as my school was concerned, that was my destiny, you know, to be a cheese counter with one of those funny hats and hairnets. So but then as I got older, I was diagnosed as an adult with Asperger's syndrome. And I for the first 30 years of my life was probably kind of a write-off with social anxiety, things like that, things that people with Asperger's kind of struggle with. And then I was prescribed SSRIs for the first time when I was 30, and that was kind of a liberating moment for me, which because the social anxiety was completely kind of cured. It was miraculous almost. And from that time on, I went to university, got a degree. I met a partner, had a baby, and became interested in scholarship. And it was about that time, because I didn't have any qualifications, I had to kind of enter academia by in what you might call a Mickey Mouse degree. So I had a degree that you didn't need to have any qualifications to do. So I did art history. But during that, I learned a lot. It was very politically orientated. I learned a lot about Marxism, feminism, all of those kinds of things, postmodernism, semiotics, all those kinds of things. And at the same time, but I was getting really, really interested in evolutionary theory. So at one, I was a mature student, obviously. So the kind of Marxist indoctrination was going in one ear, and then at home I was kind of reading the positivist, rationalist discourse on evolutionary theory. And the evolutionary theory won, but I learned as much about the postmodernism, Marxism, all that kind of thing in order to critique it from an evolutionary perspective.
Okay, so I do have a question. Sorry, that's just an interesting sort of, I guess, juxtaposition to see Marxism coming at you from one side and then the evolutionary theory. Now, did you How did you decide, okay, I'm going to use this one to critique the other, as opposed to Marxism to critique, say, evolutionary theory? Like you chose to do evolutionary theory against Marxism.
I was open-minded at first because, like everybody, I thought I was a feminist. That kind of reasonable person definition of a feminist, where kind of all women want, is not to be treated like doormats, to have same rights as that kind of definition of feminism. Which is what I call the reasonable person definition of feminism, which all reasonable people would agree with, of course. But in the course of, studying feminism, I found out that's not what feminism is at all. Feminism is particularly the belief in patriarchy, that women are oppressed. All women are oppressed by all men via the process of patriarchy. And all feminisms, there are lots of different feminisms, but all feminisms believe in patriarchy, believe that all women are oppressed by men.
Okay.
And learning about evolutionary anthropology, evolutionary psychology, different selection pressures, that kind of thing, I realized that just wasn't true. So at the time, I tried to kind of, I was inspired by E.O. Wilson's idea of consilience, which he had an idea about bringing together the natural and the social sciences. So I kind of had an idea about what would an evolutionary feminism look like?
Okay.
So that was my idea in about 2004, 2005. And so I didn't know anybody that was doing it. My undergraduate dissertation was a kind of an attempt to synthesize feminism and evolutionary psychology.
Okay.
And through one of my mentors, I heard about Helena Cronin, and then I discovered a woman called Greet van der Massen from Ghent University, who describes herself as both a Darwinian feminist and a feminist Darwinian, but she's a fantastic scholar. She's more of a Darwinian than she is a feminist. Puts the research before she does the feminist kind of research methods anyway. And so there was a dialogue between both of us, and that's when I decided to create something called Darwinian Gender Studies, which was an online forum, which was to talk about these kinds of issues and hopefully attract people from both areas. And as I said before, kind of in the spirit of E.O. Wilson's consilience, try to kind of find a place where they can both meet, because I thought there was a lot of things in feminism that could be informed by evolutionary theory, such as the different selection pressures that women go through aren't necessarily the fault of men. They're the fault of evolution. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way the world is.
Okay.
We don't need to blame men for that.
Right.
But it's not men's fault. It's not patriarchy's fault. It's just the world's fault. It's just life.
Okay, so can you give a few examples there? Selection pressures that are not, like you say, men's fault. They're just...
Yeah, well, the fact that women have babies. Right. Men don't have babies. Women have babies. Women have to, once they reach puberty, once they reach a certain age, they go through puberty. Now, their puberty is different from men's because they become fertile. Their bodies are flooded with estrogen. Their bodies are not flooded with testosterone, which is what happens with men. Boys and girls are pretty much the same, even kind of looking and in strength and all that kind of things, until they get to puberty, and then their paths, in an evolutionary sense, begin to diverge. Female puberty happens, male puberty happens, and this basically starts the different selection pressures that women go through. Whereas men, there's a book called Warriors and Worriers by behavioral psychologist, I think she is, called Joyce Benenson, and she kind of describes these two divergent paths that men and women go on, and the selection pressures that they go on, which basically means that that they grow to kind of sexual maturity. They have to survive certain different struggles, different pressures, different pressures and different obstacles that life puts in front of them. Boys tend to they grow up in a much more openly competitive environment, and in order to be successful in that environment, ultimately in a kind of evolutionary fitness way, which is to kind of attract women, to attract mates, that takes them in a different direction than it does women.
the differences between men and women. So men go through a sort of testosterone-filled aggression toward within one another, and then women do not have that.
Well, it's certainly there's aggression there, but it's not all negative. They go through boys even before puberty. Actually, they absolutely revel in competition, in contest. You know, they play war games, they play sports, they do all that. Whereas girls, even before puberty, actually, they're not out there kind of testing themselves against each other. They're there creating kind of intimate friendships, intimate dyads and support networks. Whereas boys, they're still broadly support networks, but just for different kind of with different aims. The girls' network is more kind of an emotional place, safety, kind of safe place, and boys' kind of networks are much more kind of skills based.
Okay, because what we're being told now is that the social construct of, you know, of girls and boys, that if girls were presented with the types of toys, or I guess the types of even like coloring, you know, having a pink like weapons or something, you know, like archery, you know, when the Hunger Games came out and they had bows and arrows, but they making them pink, it's like, oh, just let them be, you know, color the same for all. And
now in there, haven't they? But girls have never wanted to buy them.
Right. Well, so you're saying, what the idea is there, of course, is the exception to the rule, but it's not that things are marketed at boys and then marketed at girls, and that's what constructs who's interested in what. It's the other way around.
Well, you know, to a certain extent, I mean, there's more choice these days than there ever has been, and certainly if you're not somebody who fits the mean, like I was a tomboy.
Okay.
You don't have. Nobody's forcing you to go to the pink aisle and buy toys. You know, even if you try buying a kid a toy that they don't like for Christmas, they're not going to play with it. Just they're just going to chuck it out and find something that they do. It's the amount of choice that kids are given means that they can choose exactly what they want to do, and so I think, I mean, there's evidence. You know, it's not just humans. It's apes, it's monkeys. You know, they choose different kind of different toys to play with once they're given them. If they're given those choices, we do kind of follow, like you say, it's an average propensity.
Right.
They're always kind of going to be outliers. Like I was a tomboy. And we're gonna find, you know, people, especially in this day and age, if you, there's nothing you can't find. If you like something, you're going to be able to have that. You're going to be able to express your personality any way you want. Nobody's going to deny you that in the West.
Right. Oh yeah, that's actually a good way to look at it. That I'm going to remember that argument from now on. But anyways, but so the main reason why I wanted to speak with you, I really find that so interesting, by the way, your dissertation was on sort of evolutionary biology married to a gender studies kind of perspective. That's so interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, it's kind of quite common now. And I'm really glad that when I started the group Darwinian Gender Studies that I didn't call it evolutionary feminism. Because, you know, feminism proper, kind of patriarchal theory feminism has actually now, you know, infiltrated the evolutionary sciences. And there are people in there with a really quite specific agenda to subvert evolutionary science in the way that, and they're doing it in neuroscience, you know, with the kind of denial of testosterone and with Testosterone Rex, that kind of book, and things like that, just completely and trying to kind of erase kind of sex differences in a scientific and, you know, perspective.
Okay, so I have two. Okay, I do want to get to female dominance hierarchies, but I have two questions there. So first, can you define, I guess, the difference between what you said, the new way that people are trying to put an agenda in? Can you explain what your definition of Darwinian feminism is from what you intended it to be in your dissertation, compared to maybe what is it's seen as now to those with an agenda?
Well, I thought, I think the feminism and women's rights, or even simply an interest in female selection pressures, which is where I kind of place myself on that spectrum. I'm interested in male selection pressures as well, but I began really looking at it just evolving from that kind of feminist question, because feminism threw up some kind of interesting questions. At the time, all of the literature coming out was saying that, the rape conviction rates were in the UK around about 7%, and I just thought that's a ridiculous statistic. That's like the riddle of the Sphinx. Like, why? What is going on there? So I decided to look at it, because I thought, wow, that's a big problem. So I looked into it, and what I found was that actually ideological feminism, not just kind of what I was doing, which was in being interested in kind of the specific selection pressures that women face as they kind of grow into maturity and try to be successful in life. What I found was what ideological feminism was doing was misrepresenting statistics.
Oh,
they were conflating, and they still do it. They were conflating what's the conviction rate. The conviction rate with what's called the attrition rate, which basically means that every allegation that goes to the police, whether it's proven or not, and then falls out of the kind of process, even before it gets to court, that's the attrition rate. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of quite high. But that's quite high in all crimes. That's high in burglary. That's high in, everything. But feminists were... So that 7% statistic was actually the attrition rate. It wasn't the conviction rate.
Oh, okay.
The conviction rate was about 58%. And that was on a par with other crimes. The attrition rate was on a par with other crimes. And there was a report came out by Baroness Stern just about 2 years after I started looking into this, which basically confirmed that. And further, she said, if you Google Baroness Stern, the Stern report on rape, her concern was that feminists promoting this 7%, this woeful 7% conviction rate was stopping victims coming forward, because they thought, what's the point?
Yeah, I would kind of think that, yeah.
So feminism was hurting the thing that it was supposed to be ameliorating. And I found that unconscionable. I just thought, you can't square that circle. That's just the thing that you're trying, like the thing that you're representing as, the thing that you're trying to help is the thing that you're harming.
Mm-hmm.
And they still do it. They still constantly do it.
That leads to
statistics.
The next question is, why do those with that sort of perspective have an agenda putting in this feminist ideology into the science, rather than having it, say, be informed in the way that it was for you?
Well, I think you remember it's a new generation coming forward now. When I came up with myself and Greek kind of came up with this kind of idea together, but we didn't actually know that until we kind of found each other on the internet, and we realized we were doing the same thing. And she wrote a book called Who's Afraid of Charles Darwin, just in case anybody wants to read that.
Good.
So that was in 2006. We're in 2019 now, which is, full, that's a generation. We've got a new generation of women coming into evolutionary sciences. And what I find is that they're asking the same questions that myself and Greek were asking, back then. But because they didn't enter academia as mature students with a little bit of, maybe a little bit of skepticism, where they can kind of hear what's coming at them from the feminist Marxist kind of side of things. We had a little bit of lived experience in order to kind of say, that's not really like that.
Okay, challenging it.
There's a bit of wiggle room there. But when you've got a 17-year-old going into academia are going into college, and they're being told, they've got little life experience, little relationship experience, and not very much experience of sex, but the feminists have got them, the Marxists have got them, and they're told, this is what life is. All that kind of teenage angst that you've got inside of you, all that fear, all of that anxiety, which is perfectly natural for a teenager to have. All teenagers have it. But what they do is say, you see that kind of that knot in your stomach, that fear that you feel, they say that's not natural. That's their fault. That's men's fault.
Oh, okay.
What's a perfectly natural existential fear that all teenagers have. And they bottle it up for political and ideological reasons. But there are other groups who do that as well. I find that, the red pill kind of manosphere does that to young men as well.
Okay, so it's equal opportunity here for
Absolutely,
extremism, I guess?
Oh, yeah. It's just all ideologues and grifters and, people who just, there's nothing more kind of, I don't think, gullible than, or easy, because you're going to get any teenager, male or female, is going to be full of kind of insecurities. And they're kind of possibly the easiest people to just say, well, you know why that is, don't you?
It's them.
It's their fault.
It's the other.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, then, I think we can lead into the female dominance hierarchy. So the reason why I am interested in this is because I've heard, I'm not well read, but in this sort of layman's listening, I've been interested, and I'm looking sorry, let me just turn my light down. Yeah, so I've been interested in dominance hierarchies just on a sort of layman's sort of understanding. I've listened to some TED Talks by Franz de Waal, and he's talked about male dominance hierarchies in chimps, and Jordan Peterson has talked about dominance hierarchies quite a bit as well. So it just in the male sphere. So, and it's very interesting, but I know there's something going on with women, and the movie that comes to mind for me informing that is Mean Girls.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And but it's a movie, and I know it's based on a book called Queen Bees and Wannabes. So, and I thought they did an excellent job, but it doesn't really say things specifically. It's just all well, it's a movie, but it's sort of, that's kind of where my understanding is starting from. So could you tell me, where would you start? Would you start with primates or with humans for understanding female dominance hierarchies?
Well, I wouldn't call them, I don't know if I'd call them dominance hierarchy. I call them hierarchies. I mean, I know, I wouldn't even call them male dominance hierarchy. I like when Peterson calls them, competence hierarchies.
Right. He has sort of amended it to competence, right? I
think that's a more, it's kind of passing it in that way as well. I mean, but because there's a reason for them. They're not just, it's not just a will to power. There's actually a reason for them to exist. And I should say the kind of the go-to kind of academic probably for this kind of work is Marianne Fisher, who has published, I think recently, the Handbook of Female Competition. She asked me to write a chapter for that, but I had some family issues at the time, so I couldn't get that done in time. But if that's an Oxford Handbook of Female Competition.
Okay, I'm writing it down. Okay.
And people like Charlotte de Backer and Joyce Benenson as well, who's and my old mentor Anne Campbell. She's the late Anne Campbell. She died a couple of years ago from Durham University. She was a mentor of mine. She used to look into the kind of evolutionary psychology and the mechanisms, the ultimate mechanisms of female competition, whereas Joyce Benenson looks at the anatomy, kind of how it expresses itself in society. Because she's looked at children, from all the way up to kind of track sex differences in female.
So would you start with primates or with humans for looking at, I guess, female competence hierarchies?
I think probably look at mammals to begin with.
Oh, okay.
There's certain species of mammals which are what we call cooperative breeders, and there's a hypothesis from Helena Blafer Hardy, who's another evolutionary anthropologist, who she believes that humans are cooperative breeders, but I think we're kind of a little bit of cooperative breeders, because the flip side of cooperative breeding is that it's not actually cooperative; it's kind of tyrannical, and you get it in kind of species like naked mole rats and meerkats, all those cute little meerkats, where actually they're matriarchies, where the head, the matriarch, the mother, kind of enslaves her daughters to kind of look after the mother's offspring, and kind of nobody else is allowed to kind of to procreate, and they have to basically leave and run away, or if they try to, their mother will kill their offspring and things like that.
Oh my goodness! Then that's a matriarchal society.
And then there's kind of eusocial species as well, which you see in ants and bees and things like that, which I think is kind of what feminists want the human species to be. But the thing is, of course, all of those individuals are genetically related to each other. They're kind of all sisters. And humans, we're not all sisters, so we're not a eusocial species. We're a social species, and the unit of selection in our species is the gene, not the group, or even the individual to a certain extent. But you see, kind of cooperative.
Cooperative breeders, So you said we don't need to necessarily start with primates. We could look at mammals in particular mammals.
Yeah, well, we can go up, in the different kind of clades and what have you in the species, and because dominant hierarchies in females kind of exist on all levels of life, just like they exist in all levels in males.
Okay.
It's not a human.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a human invention.
Okay, so what's the biggest difference between male hierarchies and female hierarchies?
I think it's that male hierarchies are, well, for one, males, they love engaging in competition in order to kind of to sort those hierarchies out. Who's the best footballer, who's the best hockey player, who's the they don't shy away from that kind of competition, because it's good, for everybody. As in Peterson, what Peterson says about the competence hierarchies, our society, societies the world over, have fetishized male competition to the point, where we build massive stadiums to it. And it's a spectator sport. That's what sport is. It's enjoyment, pure enjoyment of male competition. And sportsmanship comes from that. What I think, and as the human species, we've evolved, in step with that from the beginning of time. So male competition doesn't seem like it's just there. It's part of the ether. Mm-hmm. Female competition, I think, in contrast, is denied. That's mostly what happens when I kind of talk about female intersexual competition with people on, say, like on Twitter. Mm-hmm. People get defensive and say, well, it doesn't have to be competition, or they misunderstand the word sex in sexual as a verb, not a noun. It's kind of just describing kind of that it's female competition. It's not describing. It doesn't have to be sexual competition, although it often is. Okay. It can be for status, it can be for resources, it can be social competition. It's just basically talking about female competition rather than male. I mean, you call it male intersexual competition, female intersexual competition, but somehow the kind of, even just the word sex in there is kind of triggering for some people, because they think it trivializes it, which I think it's actually, I don't think sex is trivial at all. Any species, but yeah, I mean, that's a bit telling. So people just defensive, especially other women, get very defensive if you suggest that they're in competition with you or in competition with other women. It's kind of the first response that instinctive response is usually kind of denial that it even happened.
Really? Okay, so what is our female version of the male world of sports then? Like, what is you see, that's an easy, I guess, example to point to for men. So for women, what would you point to be like, oh, so here's an example of female competition, healthy female competition?
Healthy female competition.
My impression is that we don't have a sense of what healthy female competition looks like in our society.
Well, no, I think because we followed the male model mostly, haven't we? We have kind of women entering kind of male-dominated sports, and feminists are upset about that because they're male-dominated. But we've yet to kind of forge a path in female-dominated competitive sports. I don't know what they would be, because I mean this is where kind of evolutionary psychology will often get accused of sexism, because what we're talking about is our past kind of our present proclivities are forged in the past. Okay, and female competition was generally kind of women have needed to form allies.
Why? Can you tell me why?
In social allies, in order to help them and their offspring thrive.
Okay.
So the way they compete, or what they compete in, it certainly having status and having resources and all these things kind of matter, but they just go about it. They go about competing for that kind of thing in a different way, and also competing for men who have those resources, all right, because then those resources are transferred to you directly once you're paired up, once you're pair bonded with that. His resources become your resources, and in the community you kind of take on his mantle of. You might not be as respected as him if he's kind of, but you're certainly above everybody else in the community and above a lot of women in the community, and you become that kind of queen bee,
right?
Which gives you power over other women and over resources and status, especially, and those kinds of things. And it's that kind of thing that I think feminists or will accuse kind of evolutionary psychology of being sexist, because that's the kind of the area where these instincts basically developed, and they're still with us. So they'll always be with us, certainly for as long as we remain human, because they're always going to be adaptive. They're always going to increase our fitness, and because if they don't increase our fitness, well, then you're not going to pass on. You're not going to pass on those genes to another generation. That's just the way it is.
Right. So can you give me a specific example of a way that within, say, female competition, that women would gain status over another woman? So I like examples. Sorry.
Let's look at Instagram.
Okay. Yes, let's. Yes. It's a very female-dominated space, right?
Absolutely, and it's full of beautiful women pouting, and they're influencing. They're wearing very little clothes. They've got that Kardashian kind of sculpted, kind of really kind of Barbie doll face makeup, and men aren't looking at that. Men are not looking at those women. Those are female communities. Most of the likes coming from them are from other women, and the women are signaling to other women that I mean, I don't understand. I don't think it's been looked at particularly in any great depth. It would be really fascinating to look at it, but it seems to be kind of, I think, a kind of a form of kind of runaway kind of super stimuli kind of thing. It's where women think, these are the things that men like, so we're going to exaggerate those things. They exaggerate the boobs, they exaggerate the mouth, the eye, all the
eyebrows, right? Like the really, that is, I've heard, jokes about from men, like, oh yeah, the eyebrows, Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a joke. It's kind of, if you want to really piss a woman off, on a first date, just say, what have you done with your eyebrows? And she's going to just run into the bathroom and have a massive panic attack.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of what's going on, because and actually you see the same in men's sports or men's weightlifting kind of magazines. You know, that's men signaling to other men for what they think women like as well. But women don't really like the over kind of, you know, muscle bound
there's an extent
look.
yeah
It's a kind of runaway kind of idea of kind of, well, of what women think men want, and if you excel in that, you know, other women are kind of like, oh my god.
Right.
And the same with men, it's kind of like, oh my god, because there are benefits to kind of hanging around with people like that. You know, you can, there's a lot of kind of really rich pickings for you to you know, to get when if you're friends with somebody like that, who, well, you think is gonna but I'm not really sure what happens when that kind of look translates into real life. I'm not really sure what happens, because it's not really practical. That
No.
you can't really, and you've got nails, you know, that long, and you've got hair weaves, and everything's just an artifice. So you just, yeah.
And that's almost like signaling to other women.
Yeah, no, they are signaling to other women. Definitely signaling to other women. What men want are in you know, like men's you know, penthouse. Yeah.
Right.
And they're not. Those women are, you know, like kind of they might be extremely glamorous, beautiful, and curvy, but very rarely they're going to be, you know, that kind of ridiculous high maintenance, you know, ridiculous eyebrows, pouting, yeah, false eyelashes. Just the artifice of it. It's just a bit weird.
Well, and it does seem to me, with regards to even with the way that women speak to one another and sort of backhanded compliments. Do you know what I mean? Like, again, it comes into mind, like the Mean Girls sort of like, oh, you're really pretty. And then she, you know, she says, oh, thank you. Oh, so you think so? You think you're really pretty? You know, like and that's a sort of, I guess, without there's not a physical sort of sizing up. It's almost a verbal.
It's about, I think Joyce Benton describes it in her book Warriors and Worriers as kind of, you know, I'll show you my weakness if you show me your weakness, and that means we're both equally, you know, we each have a kind of stake in each other. But the moment, you know, anybody kind of this is the kind of confusing thing, because I think I've got a pinned tweet on my Twitter page, and it basically says, you know, there's a political party in England called the Women's Equality Party, right? But every time equality is used in a kind of girl group, it generally means, okay, on the surface we're all equal, and but underneath we're all actually going to be trying our best to get what we want, but we cannot get caught doing it, because if we do, we get ejected from the group, which we get ostracized.
Wow, it sounds so mind games, right?
Oh, it is, and this is because you know, men can afford to compete more in the open, well, because they're stronger. You know, that's just a fact. We can't do anything about that. They're built, basically evolution has built men to fight other men for contests, to impress women. Evolutionary speaking, if a father died, now this isn't, you know, the red pills and MRAs are going to go crazy when I say this, but when a father died in the past, of course there were costs to the offspring, but it was less likely. Okay, or I'll put it another way. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy when that happens. And yes, there are risks to offspring, and they might not have the best outcome that they ever wanted. If the mother died, that offspring would also die.
Oh,
that's kind of, so mothers have evolved to stick around for as long as they can, until their own offspring are themselves of sexual maturity, where they can look after themselves. So does that make sense?
so we have to be subtle. because we must stick around and we can't afford a physical fight.
Absolutely. I mean, young girls, don't get me wrong, there's a demographic of young men and women who are, well, even the young women have more testosterone than older women and stuff like that. So they're more prone to kind of fighting, and you see the girl gangs, you see that all that kind of happening.
Okay.
But again, statistically, the girl who was into that, the girl who got on, Joan of Arc didn't leave any descendants. She not because she didn't die in the battlefield, but certainly those kinds of women who were into those kinds of things wouldn't have survived. They wouldn't have, if they'd had children. Well, there wouldn't have been if they'd had children. Their children wouldn't have survived. Right. So that again, it's kind of in terms of what you'd call an evolutionary fitness kind of ultimate level of analysis.
So it makes it that totally clicks for me. It makes sense because we need to stick around for our offspring, and so but we still have to order ourselves amongst other women.
Yes, yeah. And all women are doing this. They're all doing that. They're all trying to get the best that they can, but they can't. They're all trying to get the best deal that they can. And obviously they're individuals. So, it's kind of, well, I want what she's got, and why is she getting something that I'm not getting? And so there's all this kind of politics going on as well. But they can't kind of arrange a physical contest about that, because that puts them in danger, which by proxy, puts their offspring in danger. It's a much more kind of
Okay, so with regard to the agreeing about I'll reveal a weakness if you reveal a weakness, and then we'll be all like weak together in a sort of, we're vulnerable with one another. So when a girl or woman does not reveal a weakness, if she's, I'll just embrace that compliment, thank you. So what happens then? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Right. Where you can't. What does that really signal?
That signals kind of self that you're okay by yourself, which and I think that's we're able to survive these in this day and age kind of without living in those kind of nests of kind of female support. But it doesn't mean that most women don't still try and kind of facilitate them around themselves. But the tall poppies and the queen bees or what have you, it is possible for women, like Margaret Thatcher, to go out and thrive, be strong, be leaders in a male dominated kind of world. But they're not going to be popular in female circles, which you see exactly with Thatcher, don't you?
Okay. So I don't know a ton about Margaret Thatcher. It's just she was didn't have many fans amongst women.
Oh, no, well, feminists hate her. Feminists,
what?
Absolutely. Margaret Thatcher, yeah.
I didn't know that. But why?
I think, she didn't need feminism to succeed. And I think she said that herself, she wasn't a feminist. She didn't believe, she didn't believe it, and female weakness or anything like that. Well, of course she didn't. She was a self-made woman. She did it all herself, and so that's an anathema to kind of that kind of that's a rebuttal to feminism right there, isn't it? Really, to say that all women are oppressed and by all men under patriarchy, and then Margaret Thatcher climbs to the top of that patriarchal hierarchy and succeeds.
Okay, well, you know what? Good for her is what I say.
Yeah.
She's the one who says thank you and keeps the compliment and doesn't need to reveal shared weakness.
No.
So
no.
okay, actually that I am interested in how women do make it in male dominated spaces, in sort of male I guess competence hierarchies in the workplace. I'm even thinking about things like Twitter, where I've looked up the stat, it's 65% male, and so that's a majority, and so but it's chosen. You choose to join, you don't have to. It's not really like you get status on the actual site, but in the real world, I don't feel like it's...
Did you look up the statistics for Facebook as well? Is Facebook mostly...
I didn't. I think it's pretty even for Facebook, though, and way more for Instagram. For feminine, female dominated. I know for sure for Instagram it's female dominated. I don't know the stats on it, but I just looked up the Twitter one. And then also I wanted to bring up about the so I say Twitter because I also am thinking about a lot of the sort of discourse that I am seeing within sort of the intellectual dark web. I interpret it as a movement of ways of thinking and discourse. And a lot of those participants in it are male. And you could just, that's why I say for like Twitter in general, since I know the stats, I don't know the particular stats. I brought that up to you the other day, and you're like, oh, what is the sources for your hypothesis that the IDW is mostly male? I'm like, I don't know. I just see it. It's an anecdotal. It seems like it. So it seems like sort of the realm of ideas. Even look at philosophy, female philosophers. There's not many. Particularly historically. So why do you think that is? And it seems like it is a male space and that women enter a male space. Is that true?
Well, I think Twitter specifically, I think there's something about the limited word count, which makes it a quite much more of a kind of tournament arena for which encourages competition. You have to be concise to get your ideas across on Twitter. So that's what you might call a selection, a cultural selection pressure already. People who don't need to kind of go meandering around an argument, kind of might want to go on Facebook, where you can write really long posts. And
is that women? Do women sort of meander around an argument?
I'd say they do more than men, certainly within the kind of the Twitter kind of algorithm, which is a really kind of that's you have to kind of put your ideas down within a certain character limit. I mean, I really like that. It kind of makes me think really carefully about what I'm trying to communicate, and so I like that kind of thing more. I like it more than that, but it's less social. It's less kind of, and also there's no like on Facebook, your page, you can hide that from everybody apart from your friends, and you're selective about who your friends are. On Twitter, it's open to everybody, unless you're using a block bot or you have to retrospectively kind of block people who piss you off, but you can't kind of just have you can lock your page and stuff like that, but then that's not very good for signaling. If it's out there for signaling, and then you can't signal to your kind of your base.
Okay, so if I'm following you, is it almost like, and I'm gonna maybe put words in your mouth, so please refine what I'm saying. So is it on Facebook or I guess Instagram also, you can sort of fashion your page and who is around you social circle wise, where on Twitter, you don't really fashion. It's like very public. Everybody.
You're at the mercy of it on Twitter. You're at the mercy of the world in a way. And I wrote a long time ago in a kind of article I wrote about Gamergate. One in every 100 people are psychopathic or have kind of dark triad traits, and Twitter has billions of users. So that's going to give you a very healthy kind of sample of very, very nasty people who are out there just to piss you off and worse, scare you probably. That's why Twitter may kind of seem more combative and more scary to certain people.
Okay, because sorry, you're saying?
No, carry on.
On Instagram, it is open to the world, but it's, again, mostly women, and there are less women who carry those dark triad traits to the extent that men do, correct?
I think so. I'm not really sure.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can fact check people.
It's a very broad kind of, I'm using dark triad because it's a really broad umbrella, like sociopathic, kind of psychopathic.
But even then, women aren't quite as aggressive. And Instagram, it is pictures, as opposed to So why do you think on Twitter,
Well,
men? Yeah.
I think women are as aggressive.
Okay.
I mean, I think lots of studies, certainly on Twitter, find that the people who abuse other people on Twitter, like basically 50-50 split, that, you know, half of the people doing the abusing is male and half is female.
Oh,
Maybe,
really?
Yeah, there might be something in the anonymity of social media in general, certainly, that allows people to kind of put on a persona or let their shadow, you know, come out, and they express themselves in those kind of dark ways, in ways that they wouldn't dream of doing in real life because it's far too risky. But online, you know, there are no particularly physical consequences, certainly, by doing that online. So I think it's I think you do see kind of the dark side of femininity as much as you see the dark side of masculinity.
So why are there more female Instagram users than on Instagram than on Twitter? You mentioned about the word count.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just you know.
It's just a hypothesis. Yeah, I haven't read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There are certain, you know, like there are more kind of women on Tumblr as well, aren't there?
Oh, okay, I forgot about that one.
And you know, arenas like Mumsnet, you know, mums arenas, you know, where these women kind of gather, and absolutely, you know, they have certain, you know, they're forums, so they have certain groups and rooms that you can go in, but the competition on them, the bullying that goes on in them, the viciousness that goes on in them is legendary.
Oh,
really?
Is it around other women? Is that sort of?
Yeah.
It just they sort of they conglomerate around. So there's not a lot of women on Twitter, so therefore it doesn't attract other women because there's not women. Is that kind of?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm sure there's a substantial amount of women on Twitter, but again, I think because they're more kind of socially orientated, they might orientate themselves more to these kind of online. Twitter's not really a community, is it? Really, in the sense that you know, Mumsnet is, or your kind of group of friends on Facebook are. You're kind of broadcasting to a kind of to a kind of randomized audience, really, on Twitter. Whereas if you go into a kind of forum or you're on Facebook, you're broadcasting to a specific audience that you at least kind of have an idea of what that looks like and who it's made up of. Whereas Twitter is much more kind of a broad marketing kind of tournament space, I think, for ideas, which I think is why it's part of why it's so good on there, and it is a battle of ideas, but it's also why it's so fierce and might put people off.
Right. Okay. So why do you think that? Because women are social and we're very verbal, so why aren't there more, say, female philosophers? Or have I missed something? Are there a lot of?
I don't know. I had a mentor called Helena Cronin. She's an evolutionary philosopher, and she was very illustrative. I watched her kind of argue a few times and learned, you know, the subtle art of kind of like shutting down a ad hominem argument, or just speaking in very clear, succinct premises, and not appealing to emotion and things like that. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that in certain kind of arguments. I think you know, you've got to engage people, not just in rational argument. You've got to engage the emotions as well. But certainly in certain arenas, or you can just kind of do it as an exercise. I don't know. I know Judith Rich Harris is another great philosopher, but even she, you know, seems to take the premise of patriarchy as a kind of axiom. She kind of, rather than questioning that as a starting premise, she just accepts it and everything follows from that. And I think the danger of doing that is that you take feminism as an axiomatic, or patriarchy really is an axiomatic premise. Then if it's incorrect, then all that follows is incorrect. And that's kind of what I've kind of really kind of discovered about feminism and a lot of that kind of thing since then.
Is there some sort of a bit of a truth to, I think you mentioned it at the beginning about how there are sort of like sports, for example, it is a male dominated space because it sort of started off with men and it was architected. No, what's the word?
Yeah. It was built around.
Yeah, it was built around men. And I suppose maybe discourse in the fashion that it's come about was fashioned by men, not women. So maybe that's why it's mostly men. Is that something that, is there truth to that?
I think so. And I think that's what happened with the feminism in the 70s when they developed, feminists developed, what do they call it? Social constructionism. They didn't develop it because they thought it was a great tool or, it might be useful. They developed it specifically because it was the opposite of positivism. They just thought, well, that's a male model and we need a female model. Not that it might be better. It's just, well, that's what we want to do. And obviously that's on the back of kind of postmodernism, which began before then. So they kind of, they borrowed from that. But I've been asking people recently, when they've been defending kind of postmodernism, what are the great kind of triumphs of postmodernism in the world today? Kind of, did postmodernism get us to the moon? Did it split the atom? Did it develop vaccines? Did it save millions of lives?
Right.
What's postmodernism done? Why is it just as valid as positivism or the scientific method?
Well, I've heard it's really good at deconstructing meta-narratives. So.
Yeah. That's, yeah.
Well, this talk has really made me think about how much we don't know about female competition. I mean, you told me about it, like you know about it, but our society it's not really set up to see positive female competition in the way that we have positive male competition.
Yeah, I think it would be nice. I think it would be nice if we saw that a bit more between, certainly because there are lots of really powerful female figures in the internet.
Intellectual dark web?
Web. And they're all kind of they're all kind of leaders of their own kind of groups, and they must be in competition on some level, even if it's a commercial level,
right?
And that kind of thing, that would just be accepted, like kind of a male editor of, I don't know, one magazine's in competition, and they can have a healthy kind of camaraderie, or
and it's not personal. But yeah,
you think that with the women, it's just kind of, oh no, we're all doing it, we're all fighting the good fight, and
right.
When of course they want their publications to do better than the other publications.
Of course, yeah, but yeah, and it's not that it can't be healthy, but I suppose we don't really have a female version that you can point to, like, say, the guys shaking hands at the end of a game, where they like for example here in, like, for the Canadians finally won, the Raptors won. I'm sure they did like a handshake or high fives, with the other team, and good game. Well, no hard feelings, so I feel like, we need a no hard feelings for women.
There are studies that show that. There are studies that show even female athletes are less prepared to show kind of post-game affiliation. They're less prepared to go up and shake hands and say, good game, good on you for winning and stuff. They're kind of much more kind of liable to kind of hold on to the bitterness and just, there's another, I wanted to, it's called something like kind of killing the competition or destroying the competition, basically. I think it kind of, that kind of thing runs very deep in women, and I don't think we've come to terms with it or in a healthy
Right.
kind of way.
Well, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I mean, oh, there's so many more things that we could cover, but I think I this is really almost piques my interest more to have more questions. But I think I might have a look at that handbook you told me about.
What I'd like to talk about at some point in the future is that, you know, feminism itself. This is a hypothesis I kind of put forward a few years ago, and was talking about it with Greet back in 2006. That feminism itself is kind of a really unhealthy expression of female intersexual competition and of women trying to control and influence the outcome of other, especially women's sexuality. You know, the main kind of points in feminism, you know, are about kind of sexuality, about take boobs. That's kind of what I talk about in my stand-up as well. But from, you know, free the nipple to, you know, no more page 3. Feminists can't seem to kind of make up their mind what they think about boobs. You know, are they sexy or are they sexist? It's they just out. So yeah, it's female intersexual competition, the pink elephant in the feminist room. That's what I like to say.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one to end on. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, this was really, a great sort of bit of info for me.
I hope some of what I said made sense.
Oh, it totally did.
Talking.
I know because it went by so fast. So that's how I know it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for chatting, Paula.